Howdy folks. Today we are going to be talking about Rawhide Kid number 45, okay? This is a very important book because it talks about the origin of the Rawhide Kid. It's really well written. It is told to a lady of the night, I guess, or a bar girl, you could call her, saloon girl. Rawhide Kid's in town, and he starts talking to this woman who has a question about him, wants to know about him, so he starts telling his story. And that's what this is. It's kind of a flashback kind of thing. So I also like looking at these as well. These are the issues that are currently out alongside this issue. So we can see that Kid Colt Outlaw was in issue 122, and Two Gun Kid was in issue 75, and this one's in issue 45. So Kid Colt Outlaw obviously has been out for the longest of the three. Two Gun Kid, the second longest, and Rawhide Kid, the most recent. So it's a great story, and what I'm going to do, like normal, is I'm going to show each page so you can read if you want to. If you're not interested in reading the book, if you just want to hear what it has to say, you want me to give you the Cliff Notes version, you can go to this time right here. Just skip to that time right there. But in the meantime, sit still, enjoy, and I will put the books, the pages up on the screen from the book. You can read if you want to. We're going to talk about the main story, and then just like the other videos, we're going to talk about the secondary story as well, and we'll talk about that afterwards. So anyway, hang tight, and we'll be right back with a little bit of a breakdown. Okay, for those of you who read the story, a lot of what I'm going to say right now is going to be a little bit redundant, but I'm going to give my perspective on this as well as we go through it. So, essentially, Rawhide Kid 45 is a retelling of the origin of the Rawhide Kid, okay? You will get to know who he is, you'll get to know where he came from, you'll get to know why he is an outlaw, so on and so forth. So at the beginning of the story, he enters into a town that he's not familiar with, and he sits down in a saloon that he's never been in before and meets a girl that he's never met before. Her name is, I believe it's Conchita, but she calls herself Cheetah, C-H-I-T-A. So, anyway, let me see if I can find that. Yeah, C-H-I-T-A, Cheetah. So he decides, you know what, I'm going to tell my story. He's never told his story before, I don't think, to anybody, so this is kind of an interesting scenario. What prompts him to tell his story, though, is kind of interesting. And this is, we'll come back to this in a moment. He's sitting in this bar, and these two trail dusty cowpokes walk in, and one of them believes he recognizes the Rawhide Kid from when he was a young lad. He calls him Johnny Bart, which is which is Rawhide Kid's name. Rawhide Kid, not Two Gun Kid. And he says, no, that's not me, you got the wrong guy, because he doesn't want to deal with his past. The lady that is serving him realizes that, you know, he is lying. She says, what you say and what your eyes say are two different things. So she sits down and asks him to tell her his story, and for some reason he decides to. So, okie doke. He sits down and begins to talk, and his story is very interesting. And this is actually a fairly intricate tale. So I'm going to go into as much detail as I can without dragging this thing out for an hour. So, this is the story that he tells. First of all, I want to show, for those of you that didn't read the story, I want to show you Conchita, what she looks like. That's her right there. She's pretty. She has dark hair, and she's obviously working in a saloon, so we kind of know what the connotation is there. So he gets to telling his story. He says when he was a young boy, he grew up living with his uncle on a ranch in Texas. And a town called Rawhide, Texas. So that gives us a little indication as to where he got his name. He said his uncle was a famous gunfighter, and he taught him how to shoot while he worked on the ranch. He learned lots of things, but one of the things he learned is how to shoot. He became really, really great, and his uncle at one point says, "You're twice as good as I've ever been." And then he cautions the young boy. He says, you know, I hope you never have to use that gun. And the Rawhide Kid says, I never will unless it's in self-defense. So early on, the influence of his uncle was a positive one. You know, he had a positive influence from his uncle here. And unfortunately, as what happens in most tragedies or sad tales, something bad is about to happen. And what happens is two guys walk onto the ranch. We only think of it as one at first. We see one guy. And he says, I'm going to outdraw you. Talking to his uncle. He says, you're a famous guy. Nobody knows me. If I outdraw you and kill you, then I'll be famous. And his uncle says, that's ridiculous. That's a stupid reason to shoot somebody. But the guy insists, and right as they're getting ready to draw, a second guy, an accomplice, comes from behind and hollers at them. Says, turn around, Bart, turn around. So the guy, for a moment, his uncle briefly turns around, gets distracted just long enough for the guy that's in front of him to shoot him down. And he kills him dead. Which is unfortunate, but that's what happened. And the young boy, Rawhide Kid, decides that he's going to rectify this situation after he buries his uncle. He's hell-bent for leather at this point, and he's going to get his revenge, which is the next part of the story. Young Johnny rides into town, and as he walks into a saloon, the two guys that were at the ranch were telling the story, and they don't tell it exactly the way it happened. One guy says, I saw the whole thing. The uncle, his last name is Bart. Bart picked a fight, and my buddy Hawk and I were just there, and Hawk outdrew him and cleaned him neat as you please, is what he says. Of course, the Rawhide Kid's standing behind him, and he says, I reckon you're a dog, right enough, but You're a lying, no good yellow varmint. So he's picking a fight. So the guy pulls his guns on the kid, and he outdraws him, and he's getting ready to shoot. And the kid's just standing there, and faster than you can pull a trigger, he pulls his guns and shoots the guy in both of his arms, knocking both of his guns to the ground. As he's standing there in front of the saloon, he's staring into a mirror above the bar, and he sees his buddy come up behind him and pull his guns. So he puts the guns back behind him and shoots like this, incapacitating him as well. This is not very good lighting in here. So then he makes them tell the real story. He makes them tell the truth. He says, hey, you guys are going to tell me the truth, what happened. So all the people in the bar are listening, all the people in the saloon are listening, and they tell the story. They said, it wasn't a fair fight. We both jumped him. Please don't shoot us. Save, spare our lives. So the kid, of course, he's a good guy. He doesn't shoot them. But all the people in the saloon say, hey, you don't need to shoot him. We'll tell the marshal over at the county seat. We'll tell him what they said, and we'll get him into jail for you. And they said, why don't you go home and put your uncle's things in order, put his affairs in order. And the kid says, I'm never going back there without my Uncle Ben Bart, Uncle Ben, for those Spider-Man friends out there. There's nothing for me there. Ben gave me the one thing, he gave me one thing to take with me forever, the best training with guns any man ever had, and I'm going to use that training to fight Jaspers like these two, and I'm going to do it wherever I can find them, no matter what the odds are. So he rides off into the sunset, and he is now a sort of got vigilante on his mind a little bit right now. So we're going to see that he goes through a couple of panels here, and it says, so he goes from town to town, finding people that are being preyed on by it says owl hoots here, which is basically another word for pariahs. They go around and steal people's cattle and so on and so forth and try to blame it on others. So the kid goes and rectifies those situations, and that's what he does. And something is going to happen to the kid that probably was eventually going to happen anyway, but that's the next part of the story, and we'll learn a little bit more about the kid and why he is wanted by the law. So during one of these events of him trying to fix the evil in the world, he pulls on a guy, he draws on a guy who was drawing on him. A sheriff was coming up behind him and didn't see the guy draw. He just saw the kid shoot the guy in the arm, and the guy falls down, and the sheriff says, hey, I saw that. You had no right to shoot him. You didn't give him a chance. All you gunslingers are alike. You'd rather shoot than eat. And the kid sees the sheriff, and the ranch hand there, the ranch owner there, said, hey, no, you got it wrong, Sheriff. That guy was drawing on the kid. He had it coming. And the sheriff said, well, just the same, I'm going to take him in. And then he looks over, and the kid's taken off. And kid says, let's go, Nightwind, his horse, of course. We've talked about Nightwind before. Nobody's taken the Rawhide Kid. I have to live the life of an outlaw forever. Even if I have to live the life of an outlaw forever, no one's going to hold me in prison. And the ranch owner says, come back. I'm going to help you. Come back. The sheriff says he made his choice, and now there'll be no turning back for him forever. So that is how the Rawhide Kid became an outlaw. It was a misunderstanding, and being young and stupid, instead of standing firm and proving his name it was good, he took off and ran from the law enforcement at the time. And that's where his story takes a break. And next we're going to learn about his childhood, and we're going to learn about something else that we don't know about in any of the other previous Rawhide Kid books, at least the ones that I've read. So we're going to talk about that here in just a moment. It has to do with a mosquito, a birthmark, and some Apaches, which is kind of interesting. So stick around. So a mosquito, a birthmark, and some Apaches. That's where we're at. That's where we're going to go next, okay? This is an interesting part of the tale, and one that, may or may not be a little far-fetched, because some of it I don't really believe. Some of it I'll probably have to look up, but I think some of this is just Stan Lee attempting to add something into a story that he needed for the plot, but may not necessarily be true. I don't know for sure. But as the kid is sitting there talking to Conchita, she feels very sorry for him and starts to feel very connected with him. And she asked him, she said, well, you told me about your Uncle Ben, but you said he adopted you. What happened to your own parents? And the kid said they were killed in an Indian raid when he was a baby. Ben was passing by and found him alive and took him to his ranch to raise him as his own. And then something happens, something a little funky, okay? There's a mosquito buzzing around the kid, and he slaps his neck, and when he does so, he lowers the handkerchief that he always wears, and on his neck is a perfectly shaped 5-point star birthmark. It's a birthmark, it's not a tattoo. It's a birthmark that looks exactly, perfectly like a star, okay? There it is right there. And she says, that small star, how long have you had it? He said, all of my life. It's not a tattoo, it's a birthmark. Why do you look so surprised? He asked her. She says, I have seen that same birthmark before, some months ago, in another stranger passing through town. And the kid says, what, are you sure? I mean, birthmarks never look exactly alike unless they belong to ... next panel, brothers. Jumping catfish, he says, is it possible there was another baby in that Indian raid, my brother, who got separated from me in the fracas and somehow managed to survive? So I don't know about identical birthmarks between brothers, but yeah, that's what they're trying to sell us. So he says, where did he go? What did he look like? Where was he heading? And she says, I don't know his name and I don't remember his face. The only thing I remember is the mark. And he rode north, is what she tells him. So the kid jumps on his horse and takes off, excited to learn more because he realizes he may not be completely alone in the world, and this is a big thing for him. So he takes off on Nightshade, and he goes from town to town to town to cow towns and liquor towns and silver towns and all the different places, trying to find anything he can about his brother. And he realizes at some point after months and months of searching that this is like trying to find a needle in a haystack. So he decides that when he leaves this town, he's gonna give up. He's gonna stop looking for his brother. That, you know, maybe this is all just a bunch of crap, and decides to call it quits. So he goes into a bar and gets a drink, and he's hanging out, and something happens. Something interesting happens. We'll talk about that in a second. So what happened? What happened in that bar? I'm sure you can probably imagine, but I'm going to tell you straight up. He's watching a gambler, and he's gambling against this guy, this burly-looking fat guy who's wearing some weird clothes, and he has a captain's coat on. He calls himself Captain Crag. Captain Crag accuses the gambler of cheating, and he says, well, I'm going to beat the crap out of you, basically, and when I finish with you, you'll never cheat anybody again. And the guy that's the gambler says, mister, I play an honest game, and any man who says different better back up his words with a gun. And the Captain Crag says, Captain Crag doesn't need a gun to handle a cheap tin horn like you. And then he puts on a karate suit with a black belt, okay? He says he spent some time in the Orient and he picked up a few things. Not just the robe and the belt, but he picked up judo and karate. So he splits a table in half with his hand, and he proceeds to just beat the holy dog crap out of the gambler. Hits him in the stomach, throws him, tosses him. Obviously, he's a brilliant hand-to-hand combat expert. And the whole time, the Rawhide Kid's sitting back watching this, and he says, I hate to see somebody get the crap beat out of him like that, but it's not my business, so I'm not going to get involved. The gambler, meanwhile, on the ground is afraid for his life, so he says, please stay back, walk away, or I will draw on you. And he goes to draw, and the karate guy chops his wrist and breaks it. Then he stands over him, and he's getting ready to finish him off. As he does so, the Rawhide Kid looks over and sees that on this gambler's wrist is a perfect star birthmark. And he immediately jumps to action. He says, I can't let my brother get messed up here. So he tells the guy, hey, you know, you've scored enough points. You don't need to beat the crap out of him anymore. You know, if you want to fight with him more, you're going to have to fight with me, the Rawhide Kid. And the guy says, I don't really give a crap who you are. So he starts swinging on the kid. The kid's really quick. I mean, as we know from previous issues, the Rawhide Kid is a fantastic fighter. He's a brilliant, fast, strong fighter. So they battle. The kid is dodging this guy's swings, and the guy throws a big giant piece of a wooden pylon at him. The kid pulls his gun and shoots the thing. It splinters into 1,000 pieces. And in the confusion of all that happening, the kid loads up on the guy, and he hits him in the stomach, which is soft and weak, and he hits him in the chin, which is a glass chin. And the guy's not used to getting hit, so he goes down hard, and whipped him good. And then the kid says, hey, I have a birthmark just like yours. He goes up to the gambler and says, I have a birthmark just like yours. And the gambler says, my name's Frank Clay. My folks were killed by the Cheyenne when I was a kid. I had 2 brothers. One was just a baby. And during the raid, we got separated. So the kid learns 2 things, that this guy is his brother, and also he not just has 1 brother, but he now has 2. There's a little discrepancy because I believe the kid believed that it was Apaches that wiped out his family. This guy says it was the Cheyenne, which is a little funky because the Cheyenne weren't in Texas. There were no Cheyenne in Texas. Cheyenne were Plains Indians for the most part. So I don't know. Anyway, his brother proceeds to tell him a story, and he says that our big brother was a coward, that he was a sniveling little bitch, basically. And he fled to safety and deserted their mother, their father, and both brothers, and took off. And he said that that's what it was, and he never wanted to see him again. So the kid says, well, one of my brothers is one brother is a fugitive, meaning himself. The other is a gambler, and a third is a spineless coward. Ma and Pa were lucky they didn't live to see how their sons turned out. So he is really, really upset about what he has just learned. Anyway, they part ways. They say, hey, I'm happy that you're alive. I'm glad that you're an honest gambler, but I'm looking for my other brother because I don't really want to be associated with a card sharp who makes his living taking money from other people. As he rides away, he decides he doesn't really want to meet his other brother because he's a coward and he doesn't want to meet him. So as he's riding away, there's a man on a farm that's picking apples or something along those lines. He looks over and sees the kid and he says, hey, I recognize that. It's the Rawhide Kid. And he looks like he's heading in the general direction of town, and I need to go warn the sheriff because we know the Rawhide Kid is wanted. So what happens next is, I'm sure as you would imagine, also interesting. So the kid's riding around on the outskirts of town, just kind of minding his own business. And then it cuts to a scene where there's a sheriff in town, and the sheriff is being called out by a local gunman. And his wife his fiance, not his wife yet, is telling him, you can't go out there, you don't stand a chance against this guy. This guy's a well-known gunfighter, and you're not going to be fast enough for him. So sheriff says, I have to. It's my job to protect the town against gunslingers, even those that are faster than me. So he goes out. Him and this guy stand in front of each other. The guy's cracking on him, making fun of him, saying, you don't make any money. I hope that you make enough to cover your trip to Boot Hill, which is the cemetery, meaning hopefully you can pay for your own funeral with what the town pays you. All the townspeople are saying, Sheriff, you don't have to face this guy down. We know he's the fastest. We would not look down upon you for doing this. And the sheriff says, I'm sorry, I can't. I'm sworn to uphold the law. And he told the gunfighter, his name is Ramsey. He says, Ramsey, either ride out of town now or go for your iron. And the gunfighter, Ramsey, pulls his gun and says, you're gonna earn your $30 the hard way today. So he shoots the sheriff, and he misses his heart, but he hits him right here in the shoulder. And as the sheriff is going down, he pulls out his gun and incapacitates the gunfighter. And all of the townspeople are blown away by his ability. and they're grateful for him, and the doctor comes out to work on him and fix him, and everybody's happy. The sheriff's banged up pretty bad. He's got a hole in his shoulder. As he's walking to the doctor, and his fiance is walking him to the doctor, a farmer rides into town and says, "Hey, Sheriff, I just needed to tell you the Rawhide Kid. I spotted him. He's heading into town." And the sheriff says, "Well, this must be my lucky day." Obviously, it's a little bit of sarcasm, but also there's a huge reward out for the Rawhide Kid. So he says, "If I capture him, I'll finally have enough to be able to marry my fiance, Kathy, who's a beautiful blonde, obviously in love with the sheriff. I loves him for who he is." This is how they depict Kathy and the sheriff right there, okay? Sheriff looks like a decent enough guy. Kathy looks like a pretty blonde. So everybody says, "Sheriff, you can't go up against the kid. You know, compared to Ramsey's draw, the kid is miles and miles ahead of him. Ramsey would be slow as molasses by comparison," is what it says. And the sheriff says, "You're right, I can't beat him with a straight draw." He said, "But there is one thing that I can do. There's more than one way to skin a cat," is what he says. He said, "I'm going to capture the Rawhide Kid by outwitting him." And he said he has a plan. So the kid walks into town, getting ready this evening, getting ready to walk in to get some grub because he's hungry. As he's walking through, he sees the sheriff's office. It's illuminated from the inside. He can see the sheriff sitting at his desk, and he thinks to himself, "The sheriff's in his office. I hope he stays there long enough for me to get some food and be on my way without any notice, without any trouble." So as the kid's walking into the saloon, a pretty blonde in a red dress says, "Hey, I need your help. I've just been robbed. Somebody stole my valuable family heirloom. If you don't go after him, he'll escape with it." And the kid says, "Okay, no, don't worry about it. Which way did he go?" And she says, "He went down that alley. Please hurry. I've had this heirloom in my family for a long time." So the kid runs into the alley, trying to help this woman. And as he walks down the alley, there's a small noose tied around on the floor that he doesn't see in the dark. And as the kid steps into the noose, the sheriff pulls the rope. He falls down. The sheriff pulls out a rifle and holds it on him. The sheriff has his arm in a sling. And he said, "Yeah, I knew that phony yarn about a valuable stolen brooch would whet your appetite and that you'd come after it trying to steal it for yourself. But now you've lost your irons and I've got the drop on you." The kid says, "Sheriff, I just saw you in your office." He said, "Guess again, that was my dummy." He built a little dummy and set it there just so the kid would see that silhouette. It's a little silly, but it is what it is. So he says, "I'm going to lock you up and put in for the reward money that's owed to me. So come on, get on your feet." So as the kid stands up, he runs his head into the sheriff like a rhinoceros and knocks him over. But as the sheriff is falling down, he uses his left arm to swing on the kid, and he just clocks him right square on the tip of the chin, and it lights out, just out like a light. Okay. Kid wakes up and he's in the jail, and his head hurts, and he's looking out there and he sees the blonde woman and the sheriff's deputy there, and it's about to get interesting again. So the kid, as he's coming out of his groggy state, looks through the jail bars and sees the woman and the deputy and a doctor, and they're all there kind of tending the sheriff's arm because it's been shot. And as fate would have it, the kid happens to glance at his captor's shoulder as the doctor is bandaging the wound. "That mark," he says, "it looks like, oh man," and there's a perfect star birthmark right on his shoulder, right above where he got shot. So the kid says, "Hey, I need to talk to you about something important." And the sheriff says, "Well, maybe our prisoner is eager to confess some crimes to clear his conscience. I'll be right over." Basically, the kid says, "My ass, I'm not confessing to anything." He said, "I just wanted to show you this 5-point star on my neck." And he says, "Take a look at your long-lost brother and tell me your name is Joe Clay." He says, "I can't believe it." He said, "That's right. How dare you lock me up? Why, you should be in jail, you cowardly deserter," is what he says. And the sheriff is blown away. And he says, "You're so quick to blame me, but what do you know of it? I was just a scared kid who panicked in a moment of danger. I'm not proud of it. My fear was uncontrollable. I didn't even think. And ever since that grim day when I abandoned my family and friends, I've lived with a tortured conscience. Since then, I've deliberately faced countless dangers in a futile attempt to wash away the guilt and shame that can never be erased. My life has been a endless nightmare, is what he says. And the kid reflects on this for a second and says, I didn't realize that. He said, I'm sorry. And the guy says, don't worry about it. He said, it's not your doing. He said, I'm going to turn you loose. I can't lock up my own brother, even if you are a wanted fugitive. Besides, I owe you this much for the wrong I did you and my family years ago. In the next panel, we show the kid getting on his horse, and the sheriff says, even if I'd kept him in jail, I couldn't have accepted the reward. A man can't stoop so low as to cash in on his own kinfolk. That kind of money could never bring us happiness. Now, of course, his fiance wants to get married, so I'm sure she's slightly conflicted, but she says the right thing. She says, I understand, Joe. Even though it puts off our wedding again, I couldn't love you if you'd acted any differently. And so the kid jumps on his horse and says, just a word before I ride on. Forget the past. I reckon you've paid for your mistake 1,000 times over. You're a fine hombre and a top-notch lawman. Ma and Pa would have been proud of you, and I'm proud of you, is what he says. But when the kid leaves, the sheriff goes up to the people in town and he pulls off his star. He pulls off his sheriff's badge. And he says, as sheriff, it was my duty to hold the Rawhide Kid, but I didn't. I betrayed my office, so I'm turning in my badge, is what he says. People in town say, that's ridiculous nonsense. You know, the kid has committed no crime in this town. You're still the best lawman this town's ever had. Put that star back on, sheriff. So the sheriff keeps his job, and he assumes his office again. As the kid rides away, he was thinking to himself in some thought bubbles, said, I thought I had it rough. I reckon my life's been a cinch next to Joe's, his brother. He said, I wonder if we'll ever meet again. Who can tell? The trail is long, and it sure is full of surprises. And that's how it ends. That's how it ends, right there with the 3 boxes down there on the bottom. So that's the main story, and it's a fantastic insight into the history of one of my favorite characters. This story had been lightly touched on, I believe, in the first couple of issues, and partly in issue number 17 as well, I think. But yeah, it's a great story, and if you get a chance, pick up a copy. It's not an expensive book. I think they're on eBay for $25-30 in pretty good shape. So anyway, we're going to talk about the next story next. If you're not interested in reading the next story, you can skip to this time right here and just come to me talking about it. It's a super short story, only a few pages. It's a little funny. It's kind of actually pretty hilarious. So I don't think it was intentionally hilarious, but in 2021, looking back on it, it's pretty hilarious. So hang tight and I'll get that part to you. So the second story, the secondary story, is called The Gunslinger. It's a fairly generic name, but that's what it's about. And it's basically a story about a guy who's a hired contract killer or something. Anyway, he's sitting in his hotel room and somebody knocks on the door, comes in, and a guy comes in and says, I have a note for you. And the guy says, I've been expecting it. So the guy hands him the note, and on that note is simply one name, Henry Maddox. And the guy looks at it and he says, just a name I never heard of. Well, that's the way I like it. In my business, the less I know about the person, the better. So he basically talks shit and talks himself up, saying he's the greatest gunman in the world. He always has a high opinion of himself. He walks downstairs at the hotel and asks the hotel guy at the desk, where can I find Henry Maddox? And he says his ranch is only about 20 miles from here. So he says, can you tell me about Maddox? Is he good with steel? And the guy says, well, He's the fastest guy we've got in these parts. A person would be really stupid to slap leather against him. So obviously that turns our guy on a little bit. He jumps on his horse and is thinking to himself the whole way out there, fast gun. He might be too dangerous to face in a fair fight, and yet if I bushwhack him, the law will get me. So comes up to the ranch, the Maddox Ranch, and he starts to develop a plan. He decides what he's going to do is he's going to sit in the barn overnight, and in the morning when Maddox comes for his horse, he's going to make his play. The plan is a fairly simple one. He is going to hide in the shadows with his gun out, and when Maddox comes around the corner, he's going to say, "Go for your guns." And as Maddox starts to go for his guns, he's already got his gun out, so he's just going to shoot him in the chest. Nobody will ever know. He's in the shadows. It'll be a justified killing because the guy was drawing his weapon. Not exactly how things went in the West, but this is how things go in Western literature a lot of times. Louis L'Amour books and Max Brand and stuff like that. So it is what it is. So as he's sitting there, the sun starts to come up and he can hear Maddox talking to somebody coming towards the barn. And gunman hides in the shadows, and just before he enters the barn, he's thinking to himself, he says, just a second before he enters the barn, I'll call out for him to slap his leather, which means draw his gun. He'll draw, and as soon as he steps in here, not knowing I already have my gun out in the firing position, and he'll shoot him before he gets a shot. He'll be found with his weapon in his hand, and nobody will be able to prove that it wasn't a fair fight. So he's sitting in there, waiting. There's a couple nice panels, really nice panels of just the barrel of the gun pointing towards an open door, an open barn door with a shadow coming in, which I thought was a really nicely drawn panel. This one right here. It's just kind of, you know, it's well done. First of all, let me see who drew this because it's really, really well done. Art by Larry Lieber. Okay. Larry Lieber did some stuff for Atlas and for Marvel early. Guy comes in and he says, go, shoot your gun, let's pull. So as the guy goes down, he can see the guy sort of in the silhouette going down for his gun. Can kind of just see his shadow. He's still halfway in the shadow of the door. He shoots. The gunman shoots and misses. And before he can get off another shot, Maddox shoots him and kills him. It doesn't end there, though. The guys come up behind Maddox and say, "Hey, are you all right?" He says, "I'm fine. Somebody's just trying to ambush me." He said, "A pretty clever trap, but he shot too high. He just hit my hat. I guess he didn't know that the man he was waiting to gun down was a midget." Look at here. So the guy, thinking he was shooting the dude in the chest or the head, shot over his head because Maddox is a midget. Little person, whatever you want to call it these days. But it says midget here, which I thought was kind of funny. Anyway, that's the end of that story. So like I told you, it was very short. Some of these stories, some of the secondary ones have morals, and some of them are just quick little Western stories that give some context and stuff like that. So I thought it was pretty funny. I enjoyed that read. It's only about 4 pages long, that secondary story, but I really enjoyed it. So anyway, that's it. That's the end of the Rawhide Kid number 45. Like I said earlier, you can pick these up fairly cheap. If you can find one in good shape, pick it up, put it in some Mylar. They look beautiful in Mylar. Put it in your comic boxes. I've got my comic boxes here behind me, and I've got a lot of Rawhide Kids, a lot of Two Gun Kids, a lot of Kid Colt Outlaw, things like that. Yeah, these are all good stories. The art is fantastic. The stories are great, you know. And when you put that sucker in a Mylar bag, man, that looks good. Anyway, thanks for coming. If you want to see more of these comic breakdown videos, you can leave me a comment. Let me know what kind of books you want me to do. I'm going to keep doing Westerns until somebody suggests something otherwise. I've got superhero stuff, Western stuff, fantasy, mystery, horror, suspense. I've got all of it here. So if you want to hear something different, you want to hear, if you want me to do a Spider-Man story or something, just let me know. Anyway, That's Rawhide Kid 45, and thanks for stopping by.